Kelli, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm really excited to have you on. You're somebody, I know the listeners wouldn't know this, but you're somebody that's been in and out of my orbit for really like 4 or 5 years now. I know the pandemic brought us together with everything going online. And, you're somebody that I really admire because you and your partner, Jeremy, are living a life by your own design. It doesn't seem to reflect what I think a lot of people would call success or successful, but you guys are doing your thing. And right now you're living on a horse farm, which is really, really cool. And I actually just wanted to kick it over to you. This show is called Your Inside Track to Success, but what does success mean to you?
Oh, such a good question, Stu. Yeah, it's such a, I like to take a moment, right? Take a moment to let it in because I feel like we get trapped in these words and these understandings. And for me, what success is having the ability to listen to myself, having
Mm,
the ability to hear my own truth, to hear my inner wisdom, to be honest about what it is that I desire, regardless of what the world is telling me.
mhm,
And really to take these unconventional, courageous path to deepen that understanding of what is this relationship with who I am and what's going on inside of this body, which is completely what I have found on our travels. It's completely different than anything I've ever learned in school or in our community. And we just keep finding communities that are teaching us more. But I'm like, oh my gosh, so I would say that it's being able to hear myself, like actually being able to hear myself, which is a very difficult thing to do in these times.
yeah. Yeah, no, especially in a world of social media where so much messaging is being kind of force fed to us all day, every day. And that's on top of what we see, just out in the world by going outside. What works for you in connecting to yourself and hearing yourself, as you were putting it?
Yeah, you know, one thing that happens is there's always a flow with it. And I think there's a form of domestication out there in the world that says, if you do what Kelly says right now, you'll be able to listen to yourself. Or
Hmm.
if you do what this person, if someone prescribes you some type of formula, that's what's going to work for you. So I want to start off by saying it's always changing. It's
Hmm.
always changing. It's like the cycles, it's like the seasons. It's like what food is good in what season versus other. This is winter, this is summer, and there's different energies and frequencies all around. So I would say for me, first, what works is being able to slow down and take a deep breath and feel feel the vibration of my body. Is it really fast? Is it kind of staccato? Does it feel really heavy? And when I go in there and I listen, then I start to have a communication with myself. And I want to say that it's taken, oh, I mean, the whole time that we've known each other, that we've gone in and out of each other's lives, it has taken years to get to this point that I'm at now where I can drop in and hear. And so what I want to say is that I have people reach out to me like, how do you meditate? You know, how do I know that that's my voice? How can I trust that that's my voice? I was like, well, you get to go in there and you get to hear what those voices are saying. Because some of those voices don't even belong to you. Some of them are just social media, things that you saw, right? Or you're driving downtown and there's that guy on the side of the road. There's a lady on her phone. There's all the billboards. There's everything like, doom, doom. And so those have certain frequencies. But then there's also frequencies of voices inside your body of past trauma,
Hmm.
of that little child inside of you that's still saying it's not safe, that's not safe, that's not safe. Even when you're about to step into the safest thing you could ever step into, they're still in there going, no, don't do it, I don't trust that, it's not going to happen. So what works for me is spending the last 2 years with Anita. You had Anita on your podcast before.
Yeah.
um, Jeremy and I have worked with her for 2 years, and we've done many things. The specialty that she's brought to us is going down a path where you slow down to speed up. and you
Yeah.
slow down enough to be able to hear the frequencies and the things that those things are saying so that you can start to discern the difference between what is domestication that's just been given to you, what is internal stuck energy or trauma, and like what is the richness and the inner wisdom and that, you know, that warrior and that sovereignty and that magician and that lover in your body. And what it feels like in the beginning is like you're going to a rave and someone tells you to sit down and meditate and find your inner peace.
Wow.
You're like, what are you talking about? This thing, you know?
Yeah, no, no, I know that we've had multiple people on the show talk about meditation and slowing down and connecting to our inner selves. And I love the analogy of being at a rave actually, because it's a learned thing, it's a practice. And I think there are a lot of fidgety skeptics, I like to call them, out there who, for whatever reason, don't either create the time or they don't have the ability to sit still just because it's a muscle that they haven't developed. I'm wondering what maybe core insights you've picked up along the way from your meditation practice, from that practice of checking in with yourself.
I want to start off by saying that I think if you Google it, Google, right, says
Mm-hmm.
that the average human has, I think it's like 60,000 thoughts in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I always hear the phrase, life is never what you think it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, then what? Why? Why 60,000 thoughts? If it's never what I think it is, why? Why am I having those? So some core principles that really work for me is diving in and in meditation or and I also want to say that life is meditation. We actually can't help but meditate.
Yeah.
Meditation is breathing. It is living life. It is being present. So you're doing it whether you want to or not. It's just being acknowledging if we're doing it. So one core principle, acknowledging that I am living a sacred, beautiful, incredible life wherever I am. That's my choice. And in that acknowledgement, it allows me to be in my body. And then also knowing that there are many conversations going on and not to be afraid to listen to them. Because people go into meditation or they go into the internal world and they think they're supposed to turn their thoughts off and that it's supposed to be quiet. Well, really, all of those thoughts, they have messages, they have meanings. Some of them are the greatest leaders of your life. And if we don't sit down to listen to them, then what are we doing? Except the world also likes us to take everything so personally.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the best trap they could have created. They're making such good little machines out there, such good little robots out there that take everything personally, and we're afraid to be sovereign, to live these lives that are unconventional. So for me to go in and listen to who has the loudest voice and what are they saying. So for example, Jeremy and I are very different in the morning. Where Jeremy, okay, so Jeremy is like that. You would picture him like the Buddha, right? He
Mm-hmm.
wakes up, he rises, he goes and he stretches, and everything is very, very quiet and very meditative. He's like, he's the poster child for it. Now, me, I wake up and I'm like, "Ooh, let's do this." I'm making coffee or I'm making tea, I'm making noise, I'm walking around, I'm doing stuff, I'm moving things. And this works for me. And I used to think that I shouldn't do that. I should sit down and be quiet. What I have found is that in that moving around and in letting my body do what it authentically likes to do, I start to listen to the voice. And so if the voice is saying, "Oh my God, this house is such a wreck. I can't believe that Jeremy left this thing out. And I can't believe that he did this. I can't believe that that's going on. This is unfair." And I'm like, "Oh, I see you, child. I see you. So today we're working with you feeling unfair." Let's
Mm.
have a conversation about that. Where in your body does this feel unfair? What does this remind you of? I'm like, oh, it reminds me of when I was a kid and I was scared that nothing could be out of place or something bad was going to happen to me in my home. Okay, well, do you want to take a look around and be honest about the life that you're living right now and tell me what it is that you see that you've created? And I'm like, okay, well, Jeremy's doing yoga and he looks beautiful and the plants are great. And we live on a 158-acre horse farm. We have food in the fridge. You know, there's horses out there that I'm looking at. Everything is wonderful and beautiful. And so in that moment, I have taken back my sovereignty because if I hadn't taken the time to listen to listen to who was running the show, as soon as I woke up, then that voice, that child, for example, for this morning, could
Yeah.
have run the show all day long.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. I want to run the show.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. So I love that we're talking about this. And, listeners, we did absolutely have Anita Gosal on the show several months back as episode 61. I definitely recommend you guys go back and take a listen. It's a very powerful conversation related to what we're talking about now. I feel like a lot of people are on a lot of levels afraid of doing this type of work, of getting to know their inner child and to really tap in with what they're trying to say to them. I think it's because they're afraid of what they're going to find. And I'm
Yes.
curious what you would say to those people.
Yeah. One, that I love you. That's what I would
Yeah.
say first to all people. It's okay. Um, it is it is scary to be honest about the way we experienced our lives as children and through adolescence and through the present time. It's scary. And so there's a few different directions I want to go because I could get technical with it and I could get very feeling with it. And so I think as I'm listening to my inner self, I'm gonna go technical with it at first. Okay, so there's been a domestication that's been put on emotions, on human emotions, so that we can take it personally, so that we don't hear our inner wisdom and live our sovereign lives. So one of the things that happens is that a lot of people, a lot of listeners have a certain kind of judgment on anger, sadness, disappointment, shame, guilt. There's a judgment on it. Not only is there a judgment on it, it's possible that you have a list of rules of when that emotion is okay and when it's not. Even joy, excitement, liberation. Like
Mm.
you can be hanging out with someone, and if everyone's kind of in a subdued kind of energy, people are actually afraid to be excited. Like,
Mm.
oh, I don't want to be that person in the group. Or you have anger in you and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm at a table with my family. It's inappropriate for me to act like this right now. It hurts. We are all monitoring ourselves so much in the world. So then we do this inside. And now we're afraid to feel disappointment inside. We're afraid to be honest that we feel disappointed. We're afraid to be honest that we feel sadness. We're afraid for sure to feel anger. And the reason I bring it up like this is because all of those emotions are energy. They're pure, creative, untapped potential energy, which
Hmm.
is what brings us into our mission, into that creativity, into that ability to hear ourselves. And so when people go into this inward review process, which can feel like a lot in the beginning, you're like, are you kidding me? I have to look at that. I have to be honest about that. What my experience is I was afraid to actually feel the emotions of that. I was afraid to feel angry. I was afraid
Mm.
to feel the trauma of being a child and a home situation that was not safe, And to
Hmm.
go back in there and say, I feel disappointed. Like, oh my God, I feel disappointed. I feel angry. I feel so angry that that happened to me. And like, feel those emotions. And then be honest about how was the world around you responding? Well, my grandma wasn't doing anything. My teachers weren't listening to me. And, getting in there and feeling that and in your allowing yourself to have that honest moment, magic happens after it. It just does.
Oh, so good. Something that you said about almost like stifling your feelings based on the expectations of others or like a social setting. We're recording this now. It's the holiday season. I think of like sitting at the family table. You have the uncle with the views that you don't agree with or doesn't agree with you. And, we are trained to not speak up just to keep the family peace because it's Christmas or Thanksgiving or Hanukkah or whatever we are celebrating.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm hearing you say that that actually inhibits our creativity. And so, how do we honor both what we're feeling, being authentic to ourselves, not dimming our light, but also not torpedoing the family get together, if that makes sense?
Right. It's a great question. I feel that all kind of ways in my body as you say it. I'm like, oh.
Well, it's a poignant question because it's relevant to darn near everybody.
Yes, yes. So everybody's going to have their own moment. And everyone who's listening is going to hear what I'm saying in their own way, which is valid and beautiful. And I never want to make a statement that says this is the rule. It's actually the last thing I ever want to do.
Sure.
Because there's going to be some of the listeners where it's time. It's time to be the disruption at the table.
Hmm.
And that's going to be that person's inner truth to feel into that and what that looks like for them. There's going to be some people who are going to want to start to pull aside family members and say, hey, I'm not sure if you know this, but I really need to express this thing to you that I've been holding on for years. And I want to have this conversation with you. And I'll go into each of these. And then there's going to be others that go and maybe have done a lot of the inner work, and a lot of the review on sitting, where you sit down and you look at everyone and you're like, this is hilarious. It's all so hilarious. We're all just these human beings living these lives with our own tornadoes going on inside. And look at mom's tornado. Her tornado it's awesome. And maybe 5 years ago, I would have been like, I'm in hell right now.
Hmm.
I don't want to sit across the table from her. She doesn't know who I am.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now these days, it's like, she's amazing. Look at all that she's been through. So, yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I'm listening to the question because you were saying, how do we not stifle our creative energy and not wreck the table, so to speak?
Yeah, like torpedo the situation that might
Yeah.
have some type of stakes at play.
Yeah. One, I would rework the question, the internal question. And I would ask yourself, how do I bring my creativity to this table today? And what does my creativity look like? Is it that uncle's drinking too much usually gets to me and I judge him and then some kind of fight breaks out? And instead you're like, oh, uncle needs another beer. Maybe I should go grab him one. And seeing what that type of compassion and interaction gives him. And then as far as not wrecking the table, And this is a good one. This is a good question for Jeremy as well, because Jeremy is such an example of saying the thing that you're like, he just said that. But he's saying it from a place of fun and play and honesty. So my recommendation for the holidays, right, would be that you imagine before you go into dinner with your family, you imagine how you typically feel at it.
Hmm.
Is it that you feel alienated? Is it that nobody listens to you? Is that nobody's identifying with who you're choosing to be? Is it that people think you're too much? Is it that, if any of these things? And then go ahead and do a review process. Sit down with your pen and your paper, take the 10 minutes. Yes, it feels heavy at first. It feels like too much work. And it's where the magic is. It's where the creativity flows. And it's where your inner wisdom will give you the example of what is possible. Because if you can't see what's possible in that situation, you're not going to create it. If
Mm.
you go in there with past years' trauma, then nobody's asking you to do that. Nobody at the
Hmm.
table is like, oh, Stu, how's your mind? Are you still living in last year's dinner? Because they're in their own thing.
No, they're not. Yeah.
And so sit down and say, what does this remind me of? What does this dinner remind me of? And then be honest about it. And then the go-tos are, I feel disappointed, I feel angry, I feel sad, or I feel sad, I feel disappointed, I feel angry. Whatever one you want to do it and like feel them, feel that energy of those emotions, cry, if you're at scream, just be in it and then allow yourself to see what's next
Mhm.
and then bring that energy in.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say it's about honoring your true lived experience more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how often can you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just making it a practice over time so that it's just your go-to instead of just shutting down.
100%. That, I mean, yes, that's the magic right there, right there. And it takes, yeah, just when you can, go for it. And the more that you can, go for it. And the little ways that you can, go for it all the time, all the time.
I love that. And I want to pivot the conversation slightly here. We have been talking a bit about energy.
Mm.
I love that we're on the thread though of creative energy. You've actually been one of the most creative people I've known in the time that I've known you. I know that you're a hairstylist, you've done modeling, you're getting into acting. I know that you and Jeremy have traveled across the country and have pursued creative endeavors and all these different permutations. Can you speak into the courage required to continue to reinvent yourself over and over again, as much as it is about having that creative energy and giving it an outlet?
Oh man, yeah, that just went right to my heart. I feel a little emotional. Oh, speaking into the courage, because Jeremy and I, we met and COVID had hit Columbus, Ohio, and Black Lives Matter was in the height of the energy, and the short north was completely boarded up. I don't know
Hmm.
if you remember driving down there, and things were scary. Nobody really knew what was going on with the pandemic, just that we were locked inside. And we were living in Franklinton in a part of town that was coming up. And at this point in time, it was going down. It was going down. And we experienced a drive-by at night, a drive-by
Wow.
shooting that ended up missing our house and hitting our neighbors. And this was an energy and something that I was fearing. I had felt that something was going to occur. And so we packed up and left 8 hours later. We moved to Jeremy's parents' house in Cleveland. We had already been planning on getting a camper van and doing this work to travel the world, but we had not gotten there yet as COVID had hit. And so one thing that we started doing at that point in time in our relationship is we really were doing the Joe Dispenza meditations. I don't know. Do
Mhm.
you know Joe Dispenza?
Yeah, familiar.
Yeah, so it's like activating that Kundalini energy, getting in there and doing the breath and doing the visualizations. In fact, our whole wall was a dream board for me. It had the exact camper that we ended up getting. That was, of course, a wild and magical experience. It wasn't even the one we were looking at physically, but all of a sudden this one showed up and ended up being that one on the wall. We were like, "What's going on here?" And so I think the reason I feel a little emotional, Stu, is because there is a type of courage to the life that we lived. But for us, for me, it came from the inability to be unhappy. Like I could feel the unhappiness in my body,
Mm.
and I wasn't willing to be unhappy. I was I am so in love with wanting to enjoy this life and truly believe that I can. And so that courage comes from this place of like, there is something more. There is something different than what I understand, what I understand. And I see people, they've got it, they're getting it. And I see a lot of people who aren't getting it and they're stuck in the same place or whatever, some kind of situation where they're not getting it. One thing I can say is that I'm the only one who can find it. It's up to me. And Jeremy was in the same place, and we're looking at each other and we're looking around at the situation that's going on, and we're like, there is something more. There's
Mhm.
something more. And we had been in communities our whole lives where people love to make what you're good at a commodity. Right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, you're good at this, you're a good leader, you should do this. Oh, you're good at this, you should be. And I also want to preface and say all positions and careers and dreams are valid and beautiful, but when it doesn't mix with what your authentic self wants, it becomes a game. And so, Kelli, you're a great leader.
Yeah.
You should be a coach. Oh my gosh, you and Jeremy are so healthy. You should be health coaches. We had a joke. It's like, let's make a business out of it. Like everything, we'll just make a business out of it. And so that was our truth at that time. And I was like, there has got to be a community of people where I show up and it's not about my strength or what I'm good at becoming a company or a business or something that I can help them or anything. Like what if there's a community where nobody asked me to step into any type of leadership position? This would be incredible because that's what my heart needed. It needed to experience that safety and that rest. That's where the courage came from of being like, this is what I'm experiencing right now isn't working. In fact, my legs started going numb and my right arm started shooting out in pain. And I was like, my body's literally saying, I can't feel this life and it wants me to stop.
Wow. I have to ask, you said something really profound that I think a lot of people need to hear. There is the adage that find what you're passionate in and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that can be debatable. I've listened to some podcasts and audiobooks with some really, I think, amazing thought leaders on this topic in terms of whether or not that's true. But I just want to speak into the pressure we feel that the moment we find something we enjoy, we have to monetize it or it has to be a means to an end. But I'm hearing you say that just by focusing on enjoying it and being whatever that thing is, we can create a more fulfilling life.
Yes. Yeah. Anita, I'll bring it back to Anita. She's and Jeremy. They're like, "What's your mission?" Still this type of languaging, right? There's still that languaging, and I'm also a rebel. I want to break the rules. And I was like, my mission is to enjoy my life. It's to enjoy life, and like what you're saying, like if I can breathe in, and if I can find that peace and that reverence in what I'm doing in any moment, then nothing becomes work. And I think the tricky point that happens because of the domesticated world and let's say the free world for terms, is that when we start getting into the thinking phase about what we're doing, then the domesticated world will be like, oh, look, see what you're doing? It's making you money. Do more of that. Oh, see, it's doing this. Oh, see. And it'll literally turn your passion into this like to-do list, and it creates this hyped up energy in your body. And then you start judging yourself if you're not making as much money now. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, how did my passion just become so domesticated, like become some kind of strange environment, versus doing this work where you're allowing yourself to review, why am I treating myself that way? Why am I making, let's say, the art of cutting hair, which is one of my creative passions that does bring me an income, but I freaking love it. I love meeting
Hmm.
with people. I love their style. It's so precious to me. When I go in, I'm going in to meet with the people and have a beautiful creative time, and there is a financial gain that happens. So how do I allow that financial gain to go into the bank account, right? To go
Hmm.
over there, to keep living my rich life, and to also know that financial wealth is just a reflection. I shouldn't say just, I won't say just. Financial wealth, financial freedom is a reflection of how we love ourselves. That's
Ooh, can you elaborate on that?
100%. So again, thank you, Anita. Financial wealth or financial freedom, or our relationship with money, is a reflection of how we love ourselves. Because the money is always there. It's like people are out there trying to make money when money will, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about this, money will come into your life when your frequency, when your vibration is at a certain points. Well, it's like, what is that frequency and vibration, and how do I create that? People are like, I'll do more work. It's like, that's not it. It's like, how am I loving myself right now? Because we are magnets. We are
Hmm.
literally magnets to everything that we want and what we desire. And the work, right? The work, so to speak, is the internal work. So going in and cleaning up those frequencies, cleaning out some of those voices, because some of them could be your saboteur, they could be victim, they could be prostitute. These are different energies that have personalities. They have a language pattern. So you want to go in there and you want to clean them out. So I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place. I'm going to bring it back in. For example, when I'm doing something and I'm like, wow, I wish I had more money. I want my performance art to be at a professional level because I want to be paid what I believe I deserve to be paid for what I bring as a performing artist, right? This is a real conversation I have. So then hearing that conversation, I get to then be real and honest and say, okay, Kelly, how are you loving yourself right now? And I'm like, uh, oh man, okay. Right. Part of me is like, dang it. And the other part is like, oh, yes, right. How am I loving myself right now? How am I treating my body? What are the foods that I'm eating? What are the environments that I'm putting myself in? And what have I been thinking about lately that I've been afraid to be honest about because I've been thinking instead of listening?
Hmm.
Because when you're in that place of listening, man, it's just like you're being guided and everything feels free and authentic and easy, and your actions feel actually like you're resting. And you're like, what is going on here? And so being able to go back in and be honest about how I'm living my life, and also what parts of me, what parts of my frequencies get to be cleaned up, get to resonate at something that really is calling in what I desire. Also my practices. Am I putting in the creative focus into my passion? Am I showing up for it? Well, no, because then these other things would be happening because that frequency would be there. Also not taking it so personally. Like, oh,
Hmm.
you're right. This is the other thing I can start doing. But it stems, what I'm saying is when you go in and when you do that reviewal work and when you're honest about what it reminds you of, and then you're honest about the way that it makes you feel, and you create all that honesty, those thoughts, boom, go away. And then that inner listening happens. And now you're focused and now you're in the rhythm. And then financial stability is coming in, or more money or connections. This magic is coming in.
And so maybe just to reflect it back to you for the listeners,
Sure.
I feel like a big theme of this conversation as a whole is we all have a programmed idea of what success is, what things need to look like, whatever pressures we have or feel or experience in terms of achieving those standards that are being set largely by ourselves in our minds. And then it's about unlearning that and connecting to what actually feels authentic for ourselves so that we can create a life for ourselves that's more joyful, more fulfilling, so on and so forth. And I'm hearing you say that it requires releasing attachment to what it has to look like.
100%. Yeah, you definitely want to release, because one of the big phrases that we say is through Anita is this or even better for myself and the world. This or even better for myself and the world. And what we've learned when you talk about Jeremy and I, having the courage to travel the world and going, in our camper van for a year and really asking ourselves, what is it that we believe? Who are we? And putting ourselves in different communities and different environments that show us a different way of life, to leading us to Austin and then Peru for a year and a half, living in the Sacred Valley, seeing a completely different way of life. It's like being able to know that there's other conversations going on, and that we're not going to find those conversations by thinking about it. We're not going to find them by thinking about it. We're going to go and find it by listening, which means you don't have any thoughts about it, which means you allow yourself to be surprised by it. Allow
Mm.
yourself to trust what's in front of you. Know that you said, I'm hungry, and you visualized an apple. But then when a big multifaceted fruit salad shows up, you're not like, oh, it's not an apple. You're like, wow, that's way better than the apple that I just saw in my head. Thank you.
And I can feel all the control freaks listening to this podcast tense up hearing you say that. But it's so true. We can't always be in control, and we get to, give it up to God, the universe, whatever you, the listener, might ascribe your beliefs to. Just know that there is something out there that has your back if only you're willing to allow it to do so.
Beautifully said. Yes.
Kelli, this has been a really amazing conversation, and I want to make sure that listeners know where to connect with you, continue the conversation offline. What are the best ways for folks to pick this conversation up where we're going to leave off today?
So Kelli Gendalå on Instagram is perfect. If you're wanting to reach out to me individually as well, you can go to Strawberry Fox Salon. My number's there. You can text me. Yeah, I think those are the two great ways.
I love it. And we will have all of Kelli's contact info made readily available in the show notes, wherever you guys are finding the conversation today, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you guys get your podcasts. Kelli, I want to acknowledge you for being a really bright light. And it's not because the sun is peeking over your shoulder, but just bringing this conversation together. And I think really having a really awesome perspective on conversations that we have pretty frequently here on the show. Just somebody that is authentic, is leading their authentic life, and makes no apologies for it. I think
Mm,
that's pretty commendable.
thank
And
you.
Something that I want to ask you, because we ask everybody that's on the show, what are you acknowledging yourself for today?
Thank you. Today, I am acknowledging myself for listening to nature. Being out here on the horse farm, I'm going to go for a nice long walk and just listening to nature. The trees, the plants, the sun, the stars, knowing that I am all those things outside of me and inside of me, and breathing that in and loving myself. Yeah.
Love that. More opportunities for you to pause and connect in with yourself.
And then get creative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, this has been another episode of Your Inside Track to Success. We will catch you again next time with another amazing guest or message. Please share this out with at least one person if you got any value from today's conversation. And I know that you did. We'll see you next time.